Well, hey, good afternoon. Hopefully you are in good spirits. I got some positive feedback on the last video that I posted and was told, hey, you should do some more of these. I'll try to keep this one a little bit shorter, but on my drive this morning, I was listening to the Reasonable Faith podcast by William Lane Craig, and they mentioned some books that were coming out that he had contributed to, and one of those was Do Numbers Exist? A debate about abstract objects, and it is written in conjunction with Peter Van Enwagen and William Lane Craig. And the question is, and I want to kind of walk you through this, do numbers and other what we would call abstract objects, do they really exist or not? And let me kind of set the table of the different sides, and then I want to tell you why this seemingly esoteric and unimportant question actually does matter to us. And so Peter Van Enwagen is going to argue from a Platonist point of view. He's going to say that numbers actually do exist. There is the form of three that exists independent of any material thing. There's the form of 1. There's the form of 1.5. There's the form of 2. So every number has an abstract, real existence that is eternal. And for those who are Platonists, those forms, as Plato called them, are more real than what we see today. So he would say that along with these numbers, he would say that there is the form of a table, and that this is the perfect table, and that every table here in the physical realm draws its table-ness from that form of table. There's a form of triangle, there's a form of circle. So everything that exists draws from one or more forms there to create its existence. Now, there is a famous picture, and I don't remember the name of it, but it shows Plato and Aristotle talking. You'll see Plato pointing up, and you'll see Aristotle pointing down, and it's to demonstrate the differences in their philosophies. Plato basically said, we look up to find the meaning because it's those abstract ideas that give things their essence. And those abstract objects that give things their essence, their nature, because they're drawing from them. Where Aristotle would say, no, that's crazy. Those things don't exist. What we do is we look at all the particulars here and we abstract from those particulars what it means to be a table, what it means to be a tree, what does it mean to be 2 or 3 in number. And so Aristotle would say that those things don't really exist. And he would say a little bit more than that, which I'm going to get to. So that is basically the side that William Lane Craig would say. He would say that these don't have any existence at all, that they are useful fictions for us to do calculations, numbers specifically. Maybe 5-6 years ago, both of these gentlemen, along with one of my professors at Southern Evangelical Seminary, Dr. Bridges, there was a debate held, and Dr. Bridges took the middle ground between the two of these. And unfortunately, I don't feel like his position was given the credit that it needed. Probably because I hold that position. Real quickly, I was listening back, and how I phrased that made it sound like I meant something else. I don't believe that the philosophers around that table were saying, Michael Mott holds this view, so we are not going to give it its proper consideration. What I am saying is that I'm probably, or at least part of the reason that I believe it wasn't given its proper consideration is because that's also what I believe. So I feel like it should have gotten more limelight than what it did. So just to clarify, because I was listening back, I was like, well, that sounds like I'm saying something that I'm not. So continue on. And it is that numbers have real existence, but only in the mind of the knower. So here is why some of these distinctions are important, and then I'll flesh out why I believe that third middle way is the actual correct way of thinking about numbers. If numbers are eternally existent, a la Plato, a la Peter van Inwagen, then they have an existence that is outside of God's existence. And so these things there would be this reality that exists outside of who God is, because these numbers would exist on their own. Where do these numbers come from? What created them? If they exist on their own, then maybe they, some type of super God over our creator God. And so that's why this is theologically important, whether these abstract objects have real existence. And so William Lane Craig has taken up the side that says these don't exist, and he gives good reasons for it. It's not just like, well, if we let them exist, then there's a bad conclusion. He also gives good reasons why why we shouldn't believe that they have actual existence. Like, does the number 3 actually exist? But I think we can all agree that we know what threeness is. We know what oneness is. We know what tenness is. We know what that is. So I think there's part of us that would want to say, well, it's not just fake. It's not just a useful fiction. There is some truth here to what it means to be 3 of something. And so that is where this middle way that Aristotle and Thomas Aquinas would further refine would take up and would say that these types of things have the second act of existence. Now, the first act of existence is existing truly, that you are truly participating in reality, and that is an action. So everything that exists has first act existence. So you could say a horse exists as long as it's living and moving around in some stable or some field somewhere, that horse is participating in the first act of existence. Contrast that to a unicorn that you and I could describe. We could talk about the properties of that unicorn. We could say, no, that's not a unicorn. This is not a unicorn. This is a unicorn. We can only do that because in some real way the unicorn exists, although it doesn't actually exist. It exists in the mind of the knower, exists in our mind. And when something exists in the mind of a knower, we call that the second act of existence. We could talk, we could give a whole bunch of details about what it means to be a unicorn, how, unicorns exist, behave, because we all have this idea of what a unicorn is. And so this unicorn actually exists, but not in a real, it's not participating in reality like a horse is, but it does have existence in our mind. And so we would take that same path for evil. Evil doesn't actually exist. You can't go out and see evil. You can't go out and find evil. It's not like we could dig up some evil someplace. But it exists in our minds. It exists as it attaches to actions, thoughts, omissions, when we don't live up to a standard. So we would say evil doesn't actually exist. So it's not something that came into being, and that makes sense because God wouldn't bring anything into being that was evil. But when God doesn't bring into being a standard, he is the standard by his own nature. And then when creatures fall short of that standard, we say that those actions, or inactions or thoughts or spoken words, whatever they be, they have the nature of evil because they fall short of the standard. So evil exists only in the second act of existence. And we would say that numbers also exist in the second act of existence because we can think of what threeness is. We can abstract what threeness is. We can use it. There's some truth to what it means to be 3, to be 4, to be a perfect square. Those all have truth values that we use every day. but they have truth because we have a knowing mind, a mind that can be self-reflective. So then the question could go back, well, are numbers eternal? Yes, they are eternal in the sense that clearly they're in the mind of God. And so if God is eternal, then God knows numbers from eternity. And so numbers are eternal, but only in the sense that they are in the mind of a knowing God. This middle way position was not given the attention that I thought it should, because both sides wanted to basically play off because it doesn't really represent what they believe. And I've heard William Lane Craig interact with Thomism before, and he's very smart. He's done a whole lot of good for Christendom writ large. However, and I've got to think that he understands some of the stuff even better than I do, but it seems like he always slightly misrepresents the position. But so that is the book, Do Numbers Exist? And if you're looking for a good read, you want to delve more into two sides of this, then you could read that book. But there are some other books that you might also want to read that are on my shelf. I've forgotten the titles of them. I'll try to send some links in there that might talk more about the first and second act of existence and talk about why we think some things exist, but only in the mind of a knower. So if you found this helpful, let me know. If you have questions, if I went too fast over something, drop a comment and I'll be happy to do another video. Thanks. Have a good day. Real quickly, I'll do a quick part two because I want to pull these books off of my bookshelf so that you had them and I could remember what they are. But the first one you might, and these are graduate level readings, but if this is, you can do this. I had a professor who would say that reading books like this is kind of like gargling peanut butter. The first time you put that peanut butter in your mouth, it's very thick, but the more you gargle with it, it starts to loosen up and gets lighter, and then you can eventually it will lose its viscosity and you can understand it. And that's what these are. So these are heavy books, but if you are interested in further reading on and kind of getting to know some of the Thomistic way of thinking about some of these, what some might consider simple questions, but with profound results. Here's one by Gilson, and it is Being and Some Philosophers. So this one will talk to you about those, what it means to exist, and kind of talks about this idea between Plato and Aristotle. Another one you might, and I still got some bookmarks from when I was reading this in graduate school, but this is Man's Knowledge of Reality, an Introduction to Thomistic Epistemology by Wilhelmsen. And this is going to really focus in on that idea of abstraction. So this one might introduce to you the idea of first and second act of existence. This is going to talk about, how a knower comes to know and how we pull those things that we see in real life into its abstraction. It's not induction, which is probably one of the biggest ideas here. And it comes to live and have true existence in our mind, in that second act of existence. And then the last one you might want to talk about, because this is going to talk about philosophy of the mind. So we'll touch on some of these, but it would be a good read if you're thinking about mind-body dualism and hylomorphic, I should know this phrase, hylomorphic dualism, and basically talks about, how matter or how physical matter and the mind can work and how our minds can control each other. So this is going to only tangentially kind of touch on this topic. But it's another good resource for talking about the Thomistic way of viewing reality, if that's interesting to you. So this one less so. I got excited when I saw this one on my bookshelf and thought I'd introduce it to you. But Man's Knowledge of Reality would be a good one, and then On Being and Some Philosophers would also be good. So hopefully that's helpful.